Now, there's a good reason why I called this course The Art of AnyLogic Modeling. It's not because of some crappy paint by number stuff, which is not how you should build simulation models, but because we can actually learn a lot from artists painting pictures. Check out this picture from an artist who painted this snowy landscape, and the artist actually uploaded a time-lapse video to YouTube of how he did that, and there's a lot to learn from this. The final picture, is hopefully beautiful enough, sunny landscape, bit of snow, it evokes emotions. But even before the artist started painting this, he already had a vision of this. And he knew what he wanted to achieve with this, maybe evoke an emotion. So the purpose was quite clear to the artist even before starting to paint. Same for simulation models. You need to have the purpose of the simulation model very, very clear. Then in the head of the artist, even before he started painting, he already had a rough scope of what should be in the picture. And the same is true with the simulation model. You need to roughly know what should be inside of your simulation model. Now let's have a look at the very first draft sketch of this painting. So here we are. This is what the artist started out with. Just some rough lines, the trees, the mountains, everything is there, but super simplified, just like what you should have maybe after a day of building your model. Remember the aluminum plant that I designed, where I literally started out with a couple of blocks, but it was the entire scope super simplified. This is what artists do as well. They start out like this and they abstract to the level of being trivial. Everybody could paint like this. This looks like a child's painting, or like a painting by me, but that's how you should start out. Now, what happens next? Let's have a look. The next thing the artist does is not add more details, but add some color. And not just some color, he adds color everywhere until the entire painting is filled with rough color. No details, but everything is now filled out. You already recognize now the landscape, the scene, the scope. It should already evoke some emotions, so you're working towards the model purpose. This is a simulation model that I would typically have after a sprint, maybe a week. So everything is in the model. We have different agent types. Everything is roughly painted, but there's still no details. We don't care about details at all. I just want to have everything in there and working with a couple of plots, a bit of animation. So when I look at the model, I recognize, snowy landscape, huh? That kind of is the end purpose anyway. So at this point, the artist could literally sell the picture and say, here's your picture of a snowy landscape. It might not be good enough, but it's a working picture. Just like your basic simulation model after the first sprint should be working and should include the entire system. So what happens next for the artist? He steps back from the picture, looks at it, and decides, where's the best area where I should add some more detail now to nudge myself closer to the final vision, the final purpose that I had for this picture. So here the artist decided, let me add some details to the mountains, to the background, a little bit here, a little bit there. This is what you do as a simulation model as well. After the first sprint, the base model stands, and now it's time to decide which area could use a little bit of refinement to get closer to the purpose of our model. And not a lot of refinement. Don't add super detailed, final level of detail kind of stuff to that area. Just a little bit. Step back again and see, is this good enough now? Or should I add more details? Or should I go to a different part of the model and add details there? That's exactly how the painter works as well. Now, at some point, you might step back and have added various levels of details here and there, but you realize this part of my picture or my model needs a lot more detail. It needs to be hyper realistic. So for in a picture, this might be like these trees and branches where the artist decides, I want these to be super, super detailed because that's where the viewer will look, and I want to invoke the emotion of being realistic. Now you can do the same with simulation models. Sometimes some parts of the model need to be hyper-realistic, using the vertical libraries of AnyLogic or even doing custom coding. That's totally normal, but you never do this for an entire picture. Imagine a picture that is extremely realistic from start to finish. That would not be art anymore. Typically not very enjoyable, but having the important bits realistic or whatever towards the model purpose is good art. So from now on, our artist just does the same thing again and again, step back, decide on some areas of the model that still need to be refined. And at some point, the artist then switches, steps back and realizes this is now not finished, but good enough. My picture is good enough to, be sold or do the purpose that it had to invoke that emotion. I'm now done with this picture. No artist will ever say this is the perfect picture. They will always say, yeah, it's good enough, which is what you need to say as a simulation model as well. You iteratively refine your model until you or the client say it's good enough, or you run out of money, or the problem is solved with the simulation model. So at that point, you end up at this final picture and you've got a good model with some high level of detail areas, some low level of detail areas, some very low level of detail areas. That's totally fine, but the model works, the purpose is fulfilled. You have a feeling of a snowy winter landscape. Now let's compare that to how beginners paint. If you're a beginner, you probably really like paint by numbers. And why is that? Because basically you follow simple rules. But with paint by numbers, the purpose and scope is always very rigid and clear and fixed from the start, and you can't change it. Not so good. The purpose is always the same, have a highly detailed picture, and you can't change the scope. And then you typically start out in one corner and just paint in super level of detail that corner, and you just go through the entire picture, bit by bit, until everything is fully, perfectly covered. But that's not how you should build simulation models, but that is literally how beginners paint their simulation models. They just drag in a couple of blocks, add tons of details to the properties of the system that they know, add more blocks, add more details, and just keep on going and going and going. The problem why it doesn't work is that there is no paint by numbers in reality. There are no numbers, there are no lines. Nobody can tell you for your system, for your problem, what it should really look like in a model. Which areas need to be detailed, which areas can be left at a higher level of detail. That's completely unclear, and you need to discover those iteratively. You can't just paint like paint by numbers in a simulation model. You need to paint your model like an artist, starting with a rough sketch, a clearly defined purpose, and then just iteratively refine parts of the model until it's good enough.